And if we take a look in here, you can see all those stems, how close they are together. You can see just how thick this stuff has been planted. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a fantastic day. It is Monday, August 21st here in South Georgia, and on today's video I want to show you this lush, beautiful soybean cover crop here behind me. Talk about how we've been able to exclude pretty much any new weed growth in this plot. Talk about our grazing system and how that system allows us to produce a bunch of eggs for next to nothing. Now, I don't remember exactly when we planted this cover crop of Laredo soybeans. It couldn't have been any more than 3 weeks ago. As you can see here, with some good overhead water, this stuff gets up and going really fast. We've got a dense vegetation coverage over that plot there. Not a whole lot of weeds going to be thriving through there. Now, we do have a few pigweeds that have popped up in the middle there, but for the most part, these cover crops like this will outpace any weed growth. And that's why these warm season cover crops are such a great option this time of year. When it's so hot outside, you really don't want to be out here messing around in the garden a whole lot. You just throw a warm season cover crop down and it grows so fast and covers the soil really nicely. You might have heard the old saying, that boy's growing like a weed. Well, they ought to change that saying to, that boy's growing like a cover crop, because as we've shown here, the cover crop grows faster than the weeds do. So this works basically like a living tarp for your soil. Now, I should mention, to get this kind of coverage, this kind of mat on your soil, you got to plant these things pretty thick, a lot thicker than the recommended seeding rate. So we put down 10 pounds of Laredo forage soybeans on this 30 by 35 plot here. And if we take a look in here, you can see all those stems, how close they are together. You can see just how thick this stuff has been planted. Now, in the past, we've had some viewers suggest that planting cover crops as thick as we do might result in us not getting the maximal benefit from the cover crop itself. Maybe we don't get as much nitrogen fixation because we've got everything packed in here so tightly. And there's probably some validity to that. But I think it depends on what your goal is, what you're really trying to accomplish with the cover crop. There's lots of different reasons to plant cover crops, but one of our main reasons is weed suppression, as you see here. That's why we plant them so thick. If we would have planted this, just say 5 pounds per 30 by 35 plot, probably would have been some room and some space for some weeds to pop up through there. But planting it so thick, we can kind of smother them all out. We also like to plant it thick because we're going to graze it with our chicken tractor here in a minute, and we need it to be dense to be able to hold up to some grazing. And speaking of grazing, here in a minute we're going to pull our chicken tractor onto this plot and let our girls start eating some of this stuff. So I figured it'd be a good time to talk about how we know when these cover crops here are ready to graze. Now, I don't really have a lot of concrete rules as far as you gotta wait till this level of maturity before you start grazing it. Last year when we grew this soybean cover crop, we waited till we got flowers and some pod production, then we put the chickens on there. But it has a lot to do with your time frame. So this plot right here is going to be getting a lot of cool season veggies. That means I need it ready in about a month or so, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and put the chickens on it now. If we didn't need this plot anytime soon, I might let it grow up a little bit more and then put the chickens on it. So it just depends on the time frame we're working with. I would say the only kind of rule I do have is I want to wait till I get complete coverage like we're seeing now before I put the chickens on it. If you don't do that, then it can end up kind of patchy, especially if you're going to graze it multiple times. Alright, so let me get my watering can out of there and some of them watermelon rinds they've been snacking on. We'll pull the chicken tractor right onto that corner right there, let the girls start eating some of this stuff, and talk about why this is such an effective and inexpensive way to raise your own eggs. Alright, so we got them on there and they're already starting to snack on this stuff. I knew they'd like it. They liked it last year and they're going to like it again. Now, when these girls are just bumping around in the yard in these pathways between our garden plots, I do give them some layer pellets in addition to some watermelon and other good snacks from the garden. But once they're on these cover crops like this, I don't really give them any layer pellets because I found that I don't have to. They like eating this stuff right here, and this stuff is really, really nutritious. Now, on occasion, I may throw some worms in there, just scatter them out, kind of encourage them to scratch up the soil a little bit there, do a little cultivation for me. But we pretty much won't be giving them any layer pellets while they're on this plot here. And no, we don't see any significant drop off in egg production when we stop giving them the layer pellets and let them only eat these cover crops here. We still get plenty of eggs, usually at least 4 a day from those 5 hens there. Several months ago, the guy that I get compost from locally brought me a load, and the chickens were grazing another cover crop plot at the time, and he was looking at them. He said, man, those are some of the most healthy looking chickens I've ever seen. They look way better than my chickens. What are you feeding them? And I just pointed down to the cover crop. I said, you see it right there? That's all they're eating. Now, we usually move the chicken tractor every single day unless we're out of town, but considering the fact that I'm going to need this plot sooner than later, I may do things a little differently here. I don't think I have time to graze it 2 rounds, moving them every day, so I may leave them on each spot for 2 days. That way, they'll work it over a little harder, and by the time they get over here to the middle, we can start getting this into the plot ready for some fall transplants as they're finishing up the rest of the plot. I'm going to keep a close eye on it today, see just how much they work over this one spot here, and I'll decide whether I'm going to do a 2-day sit or a 1-day sit. So if this system works so well, then why don't we see a lot of other people doing it? That's a really good question. Now, I don't watch a ton of YouTube videos, but it seems like every time I see a chicken tractor on YouTube, they're talking about pasture. Pasture this, pasture that, pasture, pasture, pasture. And when I see those chicken tractors on pasture, it still looks like they're having to feed those chickens a good bit, as opposed to growing some really nutritious cover crops where you don't have to feed them hardly at all. We probably buy about 6 to 8 bags of chicken food per year. That's it. These cover crops are actually a lot cheaper than buying chicken food, and that's why we like this system so much. Now, I get it, if you're doing meat birds, you really got to feed those birds to get them to put on as much weight as you want in a certain amount of time. But if you're just doing egg production, I don't understand why more people don't do this cover crop grazing system here to really cut down on feed costs and just creates this nice little sustainable workflow. And although we're working on a pretty small scale here with just our 2 acres, I do think you could implement this same system on a pretty large scale. So I've seen those big chicken tractors you pull with a side-by-side or a little tractor. You could have a lot bigger plots and do the same exact thing, just with a bigger plot and a bigger chicken tractor. So if you've got any good guesses as to why so many people are moving their chicken tractors across pasture as opposed to cover crops, definitely let me know in the comments below. So that's one warm season cover crop that we have going currently, and we're about to get another one started right here in this plot behind me, where we had those giant pumpkins that melted and we had a good many weeds to get out of here. So I came out here late yesterday afternoon, got this cleaned up and ready to plant this morning. About a week ago, I took down those shade cloth setups for our giant pumpkins, pulled up the drip tape, but we still had a good many weeds out here. I had a good bit of purslane. That's that weed that everybody wants to tell you can eat, but that nobody actually eats. And we also had a good bit of pigweed out here that we needed to get rid of. Now, one of my big garden no-nos is tilling weeds into the soil. I try not to ever do that. So the way we do it takes a little more time, takes a little more effort, but I think it significantly reduces our weed populations over the long term. So what I did here yesterday was take the wheel hoe and just kind of cut and flip those weeds over a little bit. You definitely don't want to till a bunch of purslane into the soil, because all you're doing is spreading it. So we cut them all with the wheel hoe, took the rake, raked them all out of here. I did want to till it one time before we planted today, but it's been so hot and dry, this soil was kind of baked hard. So I turned my sprinkler on and was going to try to water it down a little bit, soften it up a little bit. Went inside to cook supper. While I was in there, we got this random pop-up shower just right on time. Wet the soil down nicely. Once I was done with supper, it was soft enough to come out here, till it one time, and now we're ready to plant. So for this plot, Go Dogs, we're going to make us a little warm season cover crop cocktail. We've got some sorghum Sudan grass here, which is one of my favorite warm season cover crops. We've got some black oil sunflower, and then I found this piece of a bag of red ripper cowpeas in my barn fridge. Gonna throw those out there as well. Now I usually don't add sunflowers to my warm season cover crop cocktails or buy warm season mixes that have sunflowers in them, because really hard to graze a plot with the chicken tractor if it's got sunflowers in it. I can't pull that chicken tractor over those thick sunflower stalks. But since we're not going to be grazing this plot here, it's not going to matter at all. We're going to throw some sunflowers in the mix and just let this stuff grow. Alright, so let's start making our cocktail here. I already put a little bit of water in the bottom of this red bucket here, because we do need to inoculate these red ripper peas. I'll pour a little bit of this inoculant in here. This will give them the bacteria they need to fix their own nitrogen. Okay, that should be good. And we'll pour some red ripper peas in there. That's probably plenty. And we're going to mix those around in that inoculant there. Now we can add the other components, which don't necessarily need the inoculant, but we're just going to mix everything together and throw it out at one time. So we'll start with our sorghum Sudan grass here. About 4 or 5 pounds there. And then we'll put some sunflowers in there. That's probably a gracious plenty of sunflowers. And then we're just going to mix it all together here. The better we mix it, the more evenly we'll be able to broadcast it. Alright, so there we go. We got some nice little cocktail there ready to go on the ground. So now we'll just scatter all those seeds by hand over this entire plot, then come behind it with a rake there, comb it over, and help bury some of these seeds. Alright, that was just the right amount of seeds for as thick as I like to throw them. Got it smoothed over nicely with the rake, and tonight we'll start pouring the water to it with the overhead sprinkler when it is 75 and not 95 out here. And so we should get some really fast germination on this with the hot temperatures we're expected to have this week. What should happen once this stuff gets up and going, the sorghum Sudan grass and the sunflowers are going to get kind of tall, 5-6 foot tall maybe, and those red ripper peas, because it's a climbing cowpea, will climb all along the sorghum Sudan grass and the sunflower stalks. Now I've done this same cocktail before, or similar cocktail, with iron clay peas, and since they're not much of a climber, what happens is the sorghum Sudan grass eventually ends up shading it out. But that's why the red ripper peas are such a great option with this cocktail, because they climb, and so they'll just keep climbing up those stalks as they grow. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Don't forget to check out our affiliate links and coupon codes in the description below, and also go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to learn more about warm season cover crops, the ones we like to grow, the ones we don't like to grow, and see how we planted that soybean plot that I showed you earlier, check out this video right here that we did a few weeks ago, showing you how we get those seeds in the ground, talking about why we plant them so thick, all that good stuff. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.